Hey folks, it's Brian at 360 Politics. Glad you're joining us today. And do we have a show for you? We've got such a great range of materials to cover here that will keep you updated not only about the latest news cycle, but maybe more importantly, give you a little bit more perspective and some insights to some different angles that we don't always explore. And so with that, my only ask is to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I'll be right back to share some really important stories with you. The first story is that Trump fires top Pentagon officials, and the question becomes, is this firing just Trump doing Trump, disrupting like he promised he would disrupt almost every aspect of government? Is it Trump who's going ahead and trying to get rid of all the old ways of doing business inside the Pentagon? Getting rid of military contracts that are no longer needed? Maybe taking a look at the military on the outside and some of the trends that are very, very apparent on the outside of the military. Or maybe, just maybe, it's taking a look at some of the inside procurement projects that have been set up, maybe getting rid of old weapon systems that are no longer needed nor wanted, but pushed by congressmen down the throats of some of these generals. So with that, we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at this. It's a story that we're going to continue to follow and continue to update on episodes in the future, because the bottom line is, whether it's a shakeup, whether it's a complete disruption, or whether it's an overhaul of the Pentagon, there's a very, very important piece here that we want to make sure that we have the best fighting forces and, most of all, the best support we can provide these people who put themselves in the service of our country and in our own protection for a good, strong military. But I can tell you one thing. In my visits to the Pentagon, and I've been there before, I see many dedicated military people in uniform walking in and walking out of that institution. I also see lots of very, very fancy cars parked in the parking lot. I don't have an answer for you, but many of them are government contractors. Many of them are contractors who work with the government, and of course, many of them executives from various weapons programs. So let's take a closer look at what's going to be shaken out in this, and I will report more about this in next episodes. In other news, the White House is close to a mineral deal with Ukraine. Now you may ask yourself the question, why is the United States getting involved in a mineral deal with Ukraine? And the fact is, one thing that has been declared by the White House and President Trump is that Europe has loaned less money to Ukraine, and all of Europe's loans seem to be secured in some way, shape, or form in which Europe is guaranteed to get their monies back. I do not believe the United States has a similar agreement, at least not so far. Now, some of you might say, hey, just the investment in Ukraine and the investment in a fledgling democracy, not to mention the fact that they are fighting for their independence from an aggressive nation. We understand all of those pieces. It's just that the president and the White House and people inside of the White House are acknowledging that the Ukraine is now interested in talking about longer-term relationships with the United States and the rest of Europe about mineral resources that are available right there in Ukraine as a way of saying thank you for your help. So some of you say, well, this sounds like pay to play. I'm not necessarily sure of that. What I am sure of is that ongoing relationships and a vested interest in success always seems to move the needle when it comes to politics and the economy. Next story you're going to love. As part of the major disruptions that were promised with this new administration, Trump has had a number of policies and a number of different ideas that are being pushed through Congress. So now these congressmen are going back home. Remember, the House of Representatives has 435 members. Half of the House of Representatives is up for re-election every other year. Those are only 2-year terms. So what happens quite often is these congressmen will go home to town hall meetings and listen to their people. And we're here to say that a number of the Republican House members are going back home and not necessarily getting the welcome that they were hoping for. These cuts and much of the disruptions taking place so far, while it's been promised, while it's understood that this is what was going to happen, the fact is that many of these people are finding out that these cuts are going to affect them, affect their communities, maybe affect the jobs of some of their loved ones, maybe orders from various businesses, and of course, with that, there's a rippling shockwave through the economy, and it affects real people's lives on a local level. And so, these congressmen are up for re-election, and they are going to have their feet held to the fire because this is the way politics work, and it's part of the reason why the House of Representatives was set up this way by the framers of our Constitution. Next story, absolutely amazing about both Russia and China military operations. Stay tuned. So, Xi and Putin, ZXI, as in the president / dictator of China, and Putin / the dictator of or president of Russia, have grown a little bit more cozy in their relationship. One of the things that they are doing is Russia did not get a lot of support from China when it came to military supplies during their invasion of Ukraine. But you could say that North Korea, China's proxy or puppet regime, has done plenty, has gone overboard in supplying Russia with everything they need, up including soldiers, artillery shells, drones, you name it. They're going above and beyond in their support for Russia. And with that, we notice that Russia and China are convenient a relationship. Part of that convenient relationship is now doing military drills. Looking at the map that we have here, you'll notice that these military drills have been done over an extended period of time, but now that we're taking a closer look at this map, we're seeing that it's not just Army, it's not just Air Force, it's not just their naval exercises. There's a combination of deeper and growing relationship of how can these two countries cooperate. And if it makes you a little bit nervous, that's okay, or at least raises your eyebrow. Just understand there's so many different geopolitical themes that are going on right now in the world that we want to make sure that we're informed, we're aware, and maybe we can be exposed to some of the blind spots that may exist in our reasoning and understanding of what's going on right in front of our very eyes. And of course, maybe the other things is not what we see right in front of us, but maybe some of the things that we are completely unaware of. This next story really will do a lot to help us maybe have a deeper degree of enlightenment here. So there's a substantial concern that Trump appears to be embracing Putin. And you know what? From a lot of the outward efforts, desires to meet in Saudi Arabia with Marco Rubio and have some genuine talks about what's going on between the Ukrainians and Russia, know that this Trump move of trying to embrace or at least warm up a little bit to Putin might have some different angles here that aren't completely explored. In preparation for this episode, I've gone to great lengths to try to make sure that I have a deeper understanding of this. And my understanding is that Russia has some concerns about the continual encroachment of Europe into Russian space. And these continual extensions of NATO memberships to countries that where Russia is starting to feel continue, for lack of a better term, continue aggressive moves towards them, continuous threats. And what Trump is trying to do, at least to my knowledge, is stop the Russians from getting any closer to China, like those military exercises we just spoke about, but also maybe extend to Russia what are the benefits of being a good neighbor in Europe. And right now, let's face it, anytime you aggressively invade a neighboring country, you are not being a good neighbor. But my point's very simple. There have been continuous steps, we're going back 3 or 4 different presidential administrations, all along the path here that led us to this Ukrainian-Russian war. And not that I'm justifying anyone's behavior. If you're Ukraine, you want to be a free democracy with free enterprise and good trade relationships with the West. That is, without a doubt, their right to do so. Russia, looking back at the old Soviet Empire, which they controlled the Eastern Bloc, which eventually became known as the Iron Curtain, they feel threatened. They feel as though they are losing the old empire, some of those nations joining NATO. And of course, the idea is that many of these other countries could conceivably join NATO in the future. I don't have a complete explanation here, but this is a story, an ongoing story that will be discussed and followed at great lengths on this channel. Finally, if you're a little worried about the relationship between the United States and Canada, I am as well. We have the longest border in the world that is demilitarized. If you think about the northern United States, runs all the way along Canada, and then you take additional territory like Alaska is connected to Canada as well. For hundreds of years, we've had a great relationship with Canada. Former part of the British Empire, still part of the British Commonwealth. The fact of the matter is, we are very, very similar peoples with similar languages, similar customs, yes, even similar sports teams. But beyond that, amazing trade relationships. Do we have concerns about some of the illegal immigration that could be flowing across the borders? Of course. Some of the drugs, of course, and maybe some unfair trade practices. But the bigger picture is we need Canada and Canada needs us. And the United States is functioning at its best when we have a great relationship with Canada. And my belief is that the Canadians are much the same way. And so this is a story that we're going to continue to follow as well. And I would really like to see some movement on here to restore our relationship. Anytime you have American and hockey teams, Canadian hockey teams fighting it out, like in the first minute or so of a game, it usually isn't a great sign of great relationships. But let's face it, we can continue to grow, we continue to foster these things. And remember, we're not going anywhere. The United States is always going to be south of Canada, and Canada is not going anywhere. They're going to be always to the north of us. So our best idea is develop relationships that work and win-win situations. That's what I expect out of this administration. It's Brian from 360 Politics. Thanks for joining us. And the only thing that we ask you to do is go ahead and hit the like button, hit subscribe so we can deliver this news right to your inbox. We appreciate your comments below. And most of all, you and your membership really does matter very much. And I love enjoying the interactions with my audience. With that, continue watching the stories, and I will be able to update you with more information here as it becomes available. Make sure you stay tuned. Thank you.